David, it's great to be catching up with you. You've had a significant encounter experience with an island called Bougainville. Could you give us a little bit of an idea of where on earth is this country called Bougainville?
Yeah, that's a good question, Andrew. Where on earth is Bougainville? Well, Bougainville is an island, small island, about 160 kilometres long and about 80 kilometres wide, in the Pacific. And it's about an hour and 40 minutes out of Port Moresby by plane to the northeast. And it's actually the furthest north island of the Solomon Island chain of islands. Yeah.
Okay, so how long does it take to get from Australia by flight to Bougainville?
Yeah, you get in a plane in Brisbane, takes you 3 hours to Moresby, overnight there, and you take a trip to Bougainville.
It's a long way to Tipperary, mate.
Nothing happens quickly in that part of the woods.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how long have you been connected with this island?
Yeah, we first went there in December of 2000.
Yep.
And we sort of found ourselves there almost, by chance.
Wow.
But Rory's probably got a better explanation of how we actually got there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was in Fiji doing a conference at a church in Fiji, in Suva. And the Lord was really moving, and it was really powerful.
Wow.
It was great, actually. And then one of the guys who'd come across from this island of Bougainville to Fiji, he came up to me after one of the meetings, and he said, "Is this the glory of God?" And I'm like, "I don't know."
Yeah.
And I said, "Oh, I don't know. It seems to be working all right." And he said to me, "If you want to see the glory, you need to come to Bougainville."
Now, you're a bit of a glory, there's people that chase storms and people that, chase other things. Rory and Dave, you guys have been glory chasers and revival chasers. So what was your response to that man's request?
Oh, I went home to Dave and I said, "We're going to Bougainville." And he said, "Where's Bougainville?" I said, "I don't know, but we're going there." Yeah, so that's kind of how it started.
Okay, so 12 years ago.
Yep.
And then it's been 12 years since then. And I think a question that would be maybe good to understand is, how does Bougainville and Papua New Guinea, which seem to be, there's a relationship here. So maybe give us some insight. What's the connection between Papua New Guinea and Bougainville?
Well, Papua New Guinea, Bougainville is actually a part of Papua New Guinea at the moment, although as a result of a crisis that was there, they attained autonomous government. And so there is a relationship still, a political relationship, whereas it's not yet independent. So it's still under Papua New Guinea politically, but it really sees itself as an independent nation up and coming.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be interesting to see what happens as in the future there's referendums regarding whether or not that happens.
So you mentioned autonomy. Bougainville is an autonomous nation. But there's been a real story of heartache and conflict from what I've heard in you explaining and even sharing in your book that you've written, Rory, on Sons of Thunder.
Yeah.
What was the conflict and why did this conflict happen in Bougainville? Yeah,
it goes back quite a way when PNG was actually a territory of Australia. And Australia were responsible for PNG, and PNG and Bougainville were joined up in 1901. There was a line drawn on the map and cut them off from the Solomons, and Australia was looking for ways to make Papua New Guinea independent, and they're looking for ways of finding resources and that, and they started a very large copper and gold mine on Bougainville to establish Papua New Guinea.
Yeah.
So Bougainville has had a lot of influence to the nation of Papua New Guinea in terms of resources, minerals,
that's right.
and a
Absolutely.
financial interest in the nation of Bougainville.
Yeah, absolutely. But the sad part was, Andrew, that the Bougainville people were really pretty much ripped off, first of all by the mining company,
Right.
because they received no reimbursement, and it was their land, it was their copper, it was their gold. And so, long story very short, it's all in the book.
Yes.
But they literally came against the mining company, and all the mining company had to kind of get out of the country. But also the Papua New Guinea sent their defence force in to quell the rebellion. And so the local guys rose up and fought with the Papua New Guinea troops that were backed by the Aussies and the government, not physically there, but with their resources. But these guys took them on, and with nothing more than a Shanghai or a slingshot, started a war that went on for almost 10 years.
Wow.
And got to a place where they'd driven out the mining companies and the Papua New Guinea Defence Force. And round about the time that we arrived there was a kind of an unsteady peace that had come about between Papua New Guinea and Bougainville. So we arrived at that time. We were probably one of the first Aussies to go on in. Yeah.
We arrived there not really knowing what we were sort of walking into, you know, right at the end of Civil War, and the peace agreement was not even signed at that point, you know.
Wow.
Had we known, we might not have gone in. We just didn't know, eh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
something else.
And so your relationship, starting back in that around that 2000 mark, essentially was at the end of this crisis that you've been talking about. And there's amazing stories, which you've alluded to in your book, Royree, that occurred through that conflict within the nation of Bougainville.
Yeah.
And we won't go into those today, but those stories are phenomenal of how God has moved in that nation. And it's stories that have probably never been told outside of they're just starting to come out from the island of Bougainville. And
Yeah, it was very interesting when we first went that, you know, we started hearing stories of how God was working in revival right through the crisis period of where the people, you know, had to hide in the jungle, and God showed them, you know, very unique ways of finding the right foods and using bush medicine and, you know.
And turning coconut oil into fuel for engines and hydroelectricity.
As you do.
Yeah.
Just in the bush.
Yeah.
Amazing stories.
Yeah.
And so you'd previously had experience in Papua New Guinea, and so you had an opportunity after your first experience in Bougainville and started a relationship. What were some of the things that you felt were the needs, and how did you help or contribute, you know, in this last 12-year period? How have you contributed to the
Dave's
nation?
done an amazing job, Andrew. He's a practical guy, gets in there with them. He's got a walkabout sawmill, fells the trees and slabs them out on the spot, and then brings them out while they're still bleeding and builds a house. He's actually done quite a significant health centre and a school because all their buildings were just blown up. There was nothing left. So this was some of the beginning points of the reconstruction,
rebuilding.
of a nation and
of a people.
Yeah. So
Were they receptive to this help, and, you know, was this contribution received?
Yes, I guess it was, you know, it's a little bit difficult because they didn't know me from
their trust
a
had
bag
been
of
broken.
beans, and so, you know, when we first went in and I said I'd be able to help them, I guess they were sceptical because I think up to that point, you know, a lot of people had been there but not really helped them, and so, you know, going back in as some of the first white people who were not there in peacekeeping capacity. I think a lot of people were sort of looking and just wondering, you know, what are these guys here for? What are, you know, so when we first there, it was very, you know, very tentative.
Wow.
But we've managed to
Build a relationship.
with them.
Now they're our mates. We're good mates with the Bougainvillians.
Yeah.
So if you were visiting Bougainville for the first time, what's one piece of travel advice that you'd like to give?
Yeah, well, it's probably a little bit different from when we first went there, but when we first went there in 2012, I'd tell you to leave all your electronic gear at home because there's no power there, phones didn't exist.
No toilets.
No toilets. You've got to learn to live out of the bush.
So a true jungle experience.
It was a jungle experience because in 2000 we had a couple of old cars that had no mudguards and no lights, no brakes that got us around.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah,
That's
and that's for
amazing.
real. Those cars were beat up bombs that, you know, had to push start and they had to put a log in front of them to stop.
So there's some travel experience.
Yeah, but now it's quite different. In about 2006, 7, I think it was, mobile phones started to come into the area. And now it's quite interesting because there's many cars now that run on the road as PMV vehicles. And you see all these people with mobile phones going down the highway.
Yeah, fantastic. My piece of travel advice, Andrew, would be just look out for crocs.
Watch out for
Look
the
out
crocs.
for the crocodile of Dundee.
Wow, so not just the jungle, we're talking about crocodiles.
Yep, yep, and all the good stuff.
It's amazing. Well, thank you for sharing your hearts on Bougainville today. I think that we'd like to hear some more on this island, this jungle island that's experienced amazing things in God. So
Awesome.
Good one.